My name is Samrat Kumar. On behalf of Your Access India and Cactus Communications, I would like to welcome you to our second webinar on career development. Today, we will give you a very nice insight into how to improve your presentation skills at conferences and also how to do networking at conferences. So very exciting webinar. I'm very excited also that our main speaker, Shane Ridquist, content head of etiquette research communications services at Cactus Communication, is with us. Good afternoon, Shane. Welcome.
Hi everyone. It's nice to be here.
So Shane has quite a vast experience in editing manuscripts in the publishing sector, but also in training researchers on how to improve their presentation skills, how to build up their professional reputation. So this is going to be really great that he's with us today. So as all of you know, you who have joined this webinar, you most likely have already presented at a conference or you are thinking to present. And those who have been at conferences and have presented papers, we all know that we can do better, right? So sometimes we prepare a presentation and the audience doesn't really get it. So we wonder if, is it my research methodology? Is it the content, or is it the way I communicate it? So these are all many questions which pop up, of course, during and after presentation. And also, of course, if we are at international conferences, we also want to meet our peers. We want to meet people we maybe admire their works. We how to approach them, how to network, and how to build up a network of research colleagues who can help one in one's research career. Of course, we are in a different scenario since last year. We are hardly having physical meetings, conference anymore. Everything has moved to the online platform. However, we are optimistic that we will soon go back to this format of conferences where we can meet with our peers and colleagues and exchange ideas and thoughts and present our research. Nevertheless, during this training webinar, Shane will also touch upon the aspect of online conference presentations, right, Shane? So this will also be useful for the current scenario we're in. Okay, now before I hand over to Shane, I would also like to present to you all a very important, I would say, very outstanding tool which the European Commission has developed, which is Your Access. That's the project I'm representing. And Your Access is a network of different member states who want to promote Europe as a research destination, as a collaborative research destination, and provide opportunities for international researchers to come to Europe and work with European colleagues and try to reduce the barriers of mobility. So I will start with my presentation now. Let me just see if I can share my screen. Yeah. Please let me know if my screen is visible to you. Yeah, is it visible?
Yes.
Shane, could you just, okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, before I go into the presentation, of course, there are a few webinar information for you all. So there is a chat and question box you will see in your panel, in your user interface, where you can post your questions. Please send us your questions throughout the webinar and we will collect them and try to answer all of them at the end. But please bear in mind that due to time constraints, not all questions can be answered. In case your question has not been answered, you have the chance to contact us after the webinar and we will try to get back to you. In case you face any technical issues, please, the first thing which we always advise is log out and log in. It's possible to do that multiple times. We will send you a follow-up email with the presentations and the link of the recording. So don't you worry, you will get all this information, the material sent to you beginning of next week. We also ask you for your feedback at the end of the webinar. Please take the few minutes to answer our feedback form. And your certificate, your attendance certificate will also be sent to you in the follow-up email. As I already mentioned, Euraccess is an initiative set up by the European Union which offers information and support for researchers who wish to pursue their research careers in Europe or with European partners. And it's also a global network of researchers. Euraccess is not only present in Europe, it has also worldwide offices like the one here in India. So we're trying to connect researchers across the globe, and even more throughout this pandemic, we've been working very much to connect our research community in India with researchers in all parts of the world. A joint initiative supported by 40 plus European countries. And you see here you have the EU and its 27 member states, but there are also other countries which are associated to this Euraccess project, which do not belong to the EU per se, but to the larger European research area. So you have countries like Israel, Switzerland, Turkey, and most likely pretty soon also the UK will be part as an associated country to many of the European Union's programs. Go to the next slide. So here you see we have basically 4 arms, 4 pillars. The Euraccess project has 4 pillars. One is very important, is the job portal and funding database, where daily, freshly job research positions are being published across the from all the 40 plus countries. And there are we will go to that website and I will show you in detail how you can find the exact job according to your research stage, according to your in research field, and also according to the country you might be interested. We also have travel grant section there, which is pretty small, but there are still some opportunities to also look for travel grants, even for conferences. Sometimes foundations, organizations publish travel grants where researchers can apply if they want to go to conferences. Next to the job and funding portal, we also have, let me say with the funding portal also, there are hosting opportunities. There are also universities who are looking for researchers to come for short-term stints at their universities and where funding is available. So this is something which I think definitely benefits researchers in India. Then we have the information assistance portal, where all the 40 plus European countries have national Euraccess websites where they have clear information about moving to the country, but also give personalized assistance to researchers. Let's say you want to go to France. You can contact the Euraccess France Service Center and inquire about the opportunities it would be for you, what it would entail in terms of housing, accommodation, in terms of social insurance, health, family, moving with your family, with your spouse or with your children. So that's a kind of a very comprehensive package of assistance which this Euraccess service centers offer our international researchers. But in addition, also, we provide you with career development support. So it means, for instance, we give you tools and skills how you can develop your career as a researcher, your communication skills, your presentation skills, how it is for instance, if you are thinking to work outside of academia, how is it to work in the industry, the non-academic sector. We have a mentoring program also where senior researchers help young researchers to find their path, find their career and craft their career. Another pillar which we have is the partnering tool. Here we have a large database of researchers, entrepreneurs and organizations, businesses who are looking for partners. We're looking for individual partners, but also institutional partnership. So some of these services which we have here require that you become a member to access them. The membership is for free, but it requires that you create an account and you know, make your profile and so forth. I will talk about this again towards the end of my presentation. The fourth pillar which we have is, as I already mentioned at the beginning, is the worldwide aspect of Euraccess. We are not only present in Europe, but we also have dedicated officers in different parts of the world, in the ASEAN countries, Australia, New Zealand, China, India, where I am the coordinator, Japan, Latin America and the Caribbean, North America and South Korea. So that's also one of the great aspects of this Euraccess project, that it's global. As already mentioned, we have the main Euraccess portal, but we also have 40 plus national Euraccess websites. So if you're interested to know more about the research landscape, the working conditions, and the possibilities to work, live in France, for instance, you go to Euraccess France. If you are interested in Germany, you go euraccess.de. Or let's say you're interested to go to Greece, you go to euraccess.greece. And in all these national websites, you find also job opportunities, funding opportunities in that respective country, and also information and assistance from the service centers which are there. At the moment, we have more than 600 service centers across Europe. In some countries, there are more, in some less. Depends also on the research R&D index and also the population. As I said, they are very personalized services which you get. Like if you write to them, you definitely will get an answer, and you will also get assistance from our colleagues. Yeah, the worldwide network, basically what benefit it has to be part of the Euraccess worldwide network is that we provide you tailored information on jobs, research calls, and fundings. Especially in the case of India, we tailor like those kind of news information towards our Indian research community. So we of course select what are the trending fields right now of our researchers, what jobs are available, what research positions are available in Europe for them. So we provide you with email alerts about events, breaking news, like for instance, if a new call by the European Union has been announced, which is open to Indian researchers as well. And we connect, of course, with fellow research professionals. Through the Euraccess Worldwide Network, you get an exclusive access to a global pool of highly qualified researchers as well. As we said, we can connect you with researchers across the globe and give you a very I would say very strong support from our officers and colleagues in the different Euraccess centers. Just to give you some figures, on the Euraccess portal, you see that annually we publish around 60,000 job vacancies. So these are really jobs with full salary and all the social benefits which you get in Europe. So that's quite a lot. If you see that, it's a very large database. I would say the largest database in the world when it comes to research job positions. We have more than 18,000 registered research organizations and universities. That means those universities are publishing constantly opportunities for researchers worldwide on the portal, but they're also looking for collaborations. More than 1 lakh registered users, so that's also the largest database of researchers which we have. And funding opportunities are also available in our Euraccess portal, including for entrepreneurs and businesses. And of course, the good news, all areas of science, technology, innovation, social science, humanities, we publish in all fields. You will find in all areas opportunities for research jobs. Now, this is the Euraccess India website. That's a screenshot, but I would like to take you now directly to our website. Let me just open this. Okay, here we go. So here you see this is our, let me just a little bit over. Yeah. So this is the Euraccess main website by the European Commission. As I told you here on the top, you have the jobs and funding, career development, partnering, information assistance, the national portals, the worldwide, and my Euraccess. That's your personal access. When you sign up and become a member, you can access many of these services through your my Euraccess. So because I'm signed in, it shows up. Let's scroll down here. Here you also see we have always up-to-date information about the coronavirus situation in Europe. What are the responses? What are the impacts for research projects, for researchers who want to come to Europe? So you'll find a lot of up-to-date information by the European Commission on the website as well. And if you go down, you see here just an interesting feature. You see right now there are 12,639 research job positions available on the portal. And let's say you're country-wise interested. We're just here, Euraccess Portugal. Here you can see there are 13 Euraccess centers, service centers, 122 job positions in Portugal. And which are the trending fields in Portugal? These are engineering, computer science, biological science, and medical science. Let's go to the neighbor of Portugal, which is Spain. And here you see, of course, we have a larger scenario here because, of course, Spain, in terms of population and size, is a large country in Europe. We have over 100 Euraccess service centers across the country. We have currently 847 job positions available for researchers, international researchers in Spain. And you see that what are the trending fields are computer science, engineering, chemistry, biological science, and also physics. But you can also go to, you can go to, for instance, to the north of Europe, to Norway. You see here we have 10 Euraccess centers, almost 400 job positions. So you can scroll around and find also some key figures of the European countries. Now, what I want to do with you is go quickly to the job and funding portal. So here you see, here you come to I think this is one of the most exciting tools for researchers who are looking for a research career in Europe or want to do some research in Europe. So here you have search for job and post your offer. So we are interested for a job, okay? Now here we see the engine field. We can enter keywords, but we can also look for the research field, profile, sector, country, or if you're looking for a specific European research program. Okay, let's say we are first stage researchers, right? And how many positions are available now for first stage researchers? We have 6,855 positions. Okay, let's narrow it down a bit. Let's say, for instance, we are interested in the sector. Here we have like international, higher education, public. But let's say, no, let's go to the country. Let's say, okay, we talked about France, let's see what has France for us. So France, if we go to France as a early stage researchers, I see, 1,715 open positions right now. A postdoc position in surgical robotics is available at the Sorbonne University. A PhD student position in structural and cell biology is in the University Grenoble. PhD in physics, PhD in physical chemistry, postdocs in ORSE chemistry. So you see there are under the EU program, there are also opportunities. Let's choose another country. Let's go away from France. For instance, let's go to the neighbor, Germany. Also popular destination for Indian researchers and students. Germany, you see 925 open positions, lecturer with specified function, PhD projects, research associates, more than 20 PhD positions at the IMB Mainz in Germany. So here you can play a lot and find, country-wise, sector-wise, program-wise, what you're looking for, the job, the research position, which is the most best fit for you. But if you create an account with us, you can also get alerts from us according to your research profile. Like whenever there's an open vacancy in your research field or according to your qualification, you will get an alert from in your Euraccess inbox. That's also a great, I think, tool. Career development. That's, for instance, what we're having today with the conference presentation training. So if you're looking for optimize your career, we have here skills, tools for researcher. These are services which you have to become a member to access them, but they're all for free. So let's visit the research page. Here you have new to career development, industry and entrepreneurship. So what are the opportunities to work in the industry? There are different policy recommendations. There are some tools, mentoring programs. So there's quite a lot for you to find. You can access the tool here, like career orientation tool, and then here you see values and motivation, skills, career options, planet development. Get personalized assistance as well from our Euraccess mentors. So there's a lot of things you can look into. The next is the partnering tool. As I already said, you can find member or organizations which are of interest to you. And for that, you also have to be a member in order to access that. Now, personalized assistance. Here we are at the 42 national portals, and you can find here information about the Euraccess service network, of course, the living conditions in Europe, working in Europe, and also resettling. Like if you are planning to leave, you are in Europe and you're going back to your home country, to another country, what does it imply to wrap up and pack up everything in the host country? So you get a lot of our colleagues and officers are happy to provide you with the personalized assistance. Yeah. National portals I already mentioned. If you want to go to a specific country and you can just go like click on, let's say you want to go to Luxembourg, then you click here and you come to the Eurexis Luxembourg website. And here you have also, again, this different information regarding Luxembourg and also updates about the coronavirus situation in Luxembourg, and also contact their service centers there. Okay, so that's right now from the website. So what you have to do is, what is very important is you go to, one second, of course the internet is not it's not moving. One second, let me just go to the Eurexis India website. Okay, here you go worldwide, Eurexis worldwide. Okay, and here you go to Eurexis India. And here you have the opportunity to sign up and become a member for free. So if you click this, then you will just have to fill in a few details and you become then part of our mailing list. And what you see here is that we have a new section, which is important for, whenever there is important news from Europe or calls, we also select very interesting calls for our researchers. Like we have now the European Researchers Consolidator Grant call open. In Austria, there are 20 postdoctoral fellowships available in life sciences. And also we have in neurodevelopmental disorders, there is a project which is looking for 15 PhD positions. We also have an event section where you can look at the upcoming events which we have. For instance, of course, our career development webinars, which we are planning to continue in the next month as well. Yeah, so please sign up and become a member if you haven't already. Do it today. Back to our presentation. Yeah, so here, sign up and become a member for free. What services do we provide? We provide you with news alerts, flash notes, newsletters with important information and open calls. We organize many information sessions, webinars like this one. And our next events, please save the date, is March 26th, where we are partnering with other European institutions here in India on organizing a Science Curious series on artificial intelligence and big data. And our first webinar will be in 2 weeks from now, on March 26th, featuring the Netherlands. We will have some very interesting speakers from the Dutch universities talking about key enabling technologies. And then next month, as already said, we will continue with our career development webinars, and we will partner here with Taylor and Francis, which is one of the largest publishing houses in the world. And we will have trainers of Taylor and Francis who will talk to you about how to publish in peer-reviewed journals on April 8th. And April 22nd, we will have a webinar again with Taylor and Francis on how to increase the impact of your research also in social media. So that's also a very trending tool right now. As a researcher, you also need to profile yourself and make yourself visible on social media. So Taylor and Francis has a very good training on that. So that will also be free of cost for those who sign up. Space is limited, of course, but we will soon announce the registration link as well. So please go to india.eurexis.org and register. Send us an email if you have any questions. We're always happy to help you. Follow and like us, of course, on Twitter and on Facebook. So thank you. That's from my side. I would like now to hand over the floor to my colleague Shane, who will now do the main training of today's webinar. Shane, I will just give you the access to make a presenter and stop my screen. Shane, you're there?
Yes, Samrat, thank you so much. I will be sharing my screen right now. I hope my screen is visible to everybody.
Yes, Shane, just the slide mode.
Yes, just give me a second. Just enabling that. And here we go. I hope my slides are
Per-
visible to everybody now.
Perfect, Shane. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Samrat. So I'm just going to switch on my camera briefly to say hi to everybody. I hope you can see me. My name is Shane Ridquist, and I'm reaching out to you from Mumbai, in India. If you can hear a slightly buzzing or hissing sound, that's my fan because it's pretty hot here at this time of the year, and I'm essentially trying to beat the heat of the humidity as I speak to you from home, right? So today we will essentially be talking about how to sort of present and network effectively at conferences. And before I move on to the topic itself, maybe I'll give you a little bit of information about myself and why I am here, basically speaking to you about this topic. I essentially started out as a freelance editor during my after my master's course. I essentially started out as a junior research fellow in a laboratory, and I was in the process of just preparing all the paperwork to start work on my PhD. But as luck would have it, I had a bit of a knack for writing and editing research manuscripts. So I began to freelance, and from freelancing, I sort of transitioned into a full-time role with Edited, which is a global leader in author services. From there on in, I kind of progressed to becoming a managing editor. I trained a bunch of people in editing, and I've mentored a lot of people in terms of being able to help them publish their manuscripts in top journals all over the world. Today, I work as the head of delivery operations and content for Editage's research communication services. And over the last year or so, just the last 3 months, we've done around 2,800 science communication projects. Over the last year, we've done over 8,000 science communication projects where we not only work with researchers to help them with conference presentations, but we also help them with creating visual aids to explain their research better. We work with them to create videos that will depict their research better. We work with institutes, the top institutes in India as well as the rest of the world, and we work with publishers as well. So literally every single day of my work life, I spend giving a presentation, right? And I've done presentations across different topics, both related to research back when I was a researcher at conferences, and even now when I'm making presentations to different stakeholders in different organizations and companies, and in some cases even to folks in big pharma. So that's essentially why I'm here to talk to you. What we will cover in this session essentially is, you know, why should we be attending a conference, right? How do we present at a conference, right? And how do we network effectively once we're at a conference, right? So before I get started on our topic, I just want you to remember a few things, right? And that is, just give me a second. Yes. And that is what I'll be covering in this presentation essentially are best practices. Best practices are not rules, right? They are guidelines for you to follow, right? They are there to help you to understand how to navigate a particular situation. But there is no guarantee that if you follow a set of sort of steps or rules that you'll get the best possible outcome. You have to learn to improvise. That is a very important part of making a presentation or doing a presentation, right? So just remember that these are best practices. These are the things that you should do in order to get the best results, right? But you also have to learn to have the ability to improvise when it comes to a presentation, right? The next principle that I want you to remember, right, and this is one that takes a bit of time for a researcher to kind of imbibe, and that is less is more, right? Less is more. What I mean by that is all of us have a tendency, me included, when I started out, have a tendency of putting as much information into what we were presenting as possible, hoping that that is what the viewer would like to see. Most of the time, the opposite is true. People have very limited attention spans when they're listening to you, and especially in this day and age of social media, you generally have just about 15 seconds to capture someone's attention, right? In the first 15 seconds that somebody speaks to you, you decide whether you're interested in listening to them or not, or whether they have something important to tell you, right? So it's very important that you figure out or you condense all the critical information that you want to present, right? So that is a principle that you have to remember throughout. And the third, right, third principle, and very, very important, and these are the words of one of my professors back when I was doing my master's course. And his words were, hope for the best and prepare for the worst, right? That was his guiding principle. And it was something that helps me even to this day, especially when I'm making a presentation, right? So these three principles I want everybody to remember as we move along, right? So, right, we'll get straight to it. And I'm going to ask this question to everybody on, attending this right now. Why attend conferences? And I'd just like to see a few responses in the chat box, if that's okay. Why would you attend the conferences? Why do we even have conferences? What's the reason for that? Now, if you are talking about, the reason for attending, uh, you know the reason as to why we go ahead and attend the conference, if you're saying it is because it's something on my calendar, it's something that my PI asked me to do, or this is something that I do every year, so I'm doing so I do it, so I'm doing it here as well. Well, maybe those are not the answers we're looking for, right? The reason or the primary goal for having a scientific conference is because it to this day remains the best source to learn about new trends in your field, right? All of you who are researchers today understand very clearly, you understand very clearly that it takes a considerable amount of time to take your work from its inception all the way up to publication, right? It takes, at least in my case, when I was doing research, it took at least 5 years to come up with a with a meaningful publication, right? But along the way, you do need to be made aware of what the most modern advances in your field are, right? And the one stopgap arrangement to find out about all these new trends, to find out about all these new occurrences in your field are conferences. Because conferences, believe it or not, are the best so-called sounding board that a researcher has to know about, whether they're going in the right direction with their research. Because there is only so much information you're going to get by interacting with people within your campus, within your lab, within your institute, right? At some point in time, you need to expand your horizons and try to understand what's happening outside, the hallowed turf where you conduct your research, right? And the best way to do that is through a conference. That's where you find out where the most cutting edge research is happening, because a conference is where people present research that is in progress, right? A lot of the times conferences, people just present their most promising findings on an ongoing study, and that's how you know that this is where the field is headed, or this is what the most recent advance is. And a lot of the times as a researcher, this can help you conduct any sort of course correction in your own work. You may be looking for a particular end goal with regard to your study, but you may not know if somebody else is pursuing it. Sometimes when you're working on a project, or when you're working on a particular research question, it's important to know what else is happening around you, right? And going to a conference can sometimes help you immensely in understanding what you need to do, what sort of course correction you need to do, right? So I feel like uh, I can feel like, that's where essentially you can go ahead and have you can go ahead and find out about what's happening in your field. So then my question is, how do you how do you go ahead and ace that conference presentation, right? And I am going to help you with a 9-step process or a 9-step flow, right, which can help you in a way ace that presentation, right? So let's get started. So these are essentially the 9 things that you have to bear in mind when you are going in for a presentation. And if you follow these things through, if you follow these principles through, you generally should have a good presentation, right? Now, I just want to just set everybody's expectations here clearly, right? I'm not going to go into subject matter specific aspects because, like I said, the norms and nomenclatures and the other things that are specific to a particular subject area or to a particular conference are very, very specific, right? The kind of principles I'm going to talk to you about are very general. A lot of these things you know, some of these things you don't, some of these things you learn for the first time, right? So these are just general principles for you to bear in mind to make a strong presentation, right? So I'm going to move to the first principle itself, and that is very important. Make sure you know your audience. If you are new to the conference circuit, do a bit of research about what your conference is about, what has been the history of the conference, who attends the conference, what were some of the best posters that were presented at the conference last year, what were some of the best presentations of the conference last year, which institutes tend to participate or send faculty or students to these conferences, right? Do your homework, try to find out about your conference, right? What sort of people will be attending makes a big difference to the manner in which you shape a presentation. If you prepare a presentation that is highly technical, right, and the people attending your conference are people who just have an interest in the field and just want to know what's happening and don't want to get into the details of what is being presented, then you lose your audience in the first three slides, right? So understand the composition of your audience, right? Very critical. Spend time understanding what the history of the conference was like. Ask any of your colleagues or peers about whether they presented earlier and what their experience was like, right? And then effectively remember this. Your research is meant to be heard, not read, right? So prepare your slides in a compact manner. If you've noticed one thing in Samrat's slides earlier and my slides now, is that there is a limited amount of information, right? It's not crammed with a lot of information, right? If people wanted to read about your research, then you should just go ahead and share your research paper with them, or you should share a link to a blog where you've written about your research with them. If you are presenting to them, right, a lot, you have to do a lot of the work in terms of presenting that information. So don't cram your slides with a lot of text, right? Because they are there to hear you and not read your presentation on the screen, right? Another important thing for you to bear in mind essentially is that your audiences have typically limited attention span. This is something I mentioned at the very start of this presentation, right? In the first 15 seconds, somebody generally makes up their mind over whether they want to sort of listen to you or not, or whether it's worth their time or not, right? So here's what you should be doing, right? If you've written a manuscript or if you have any experience in writing a manuscript, right, then you know that every manuscript follows a particular structure, right? It starts with a background, it then moves on to, what the findings of your study were, and then it closes with the conclusions, if I have to look at it on a very broad level, right? So structure your talk well. Talk about the background of your study briefly, then move on directly to your findings, right? And then close with your conclusions, right? Unless you found something that was particularly unique, about the methodology, if you were able to make a tweak that helped you with the methodology, then talk about your methodology. But if there was nothing remarkable about your methodology, then probably skip that part. Go straight from the background to your findings and then talk about your conclusions. The second thing is pretty self-evident. Be simple and be clear in the language that you use. Right now, again, if your audience is one that is familiar with the terminology that you're using, right, you don't have much to worry about. But even then, make it a point to at least introduce concepts and terms that you think they would need to know about. Introduce abbreviations, right? I know a lot of people. So I used to be a molecular biologist, right? Even then, I never took for granted the fact that somebody would understand what the word PCR meant. I would still go ahead and define it at least once on one of my slides, just as a safeguard. The third point to bear in mind is be simple and be straightforward, right? You can, of course, try to explain something in a roundabout way, or you can use an analogy. But if it's your first time out, if it's the first time that you're going ahead and making a presentation at a conference, try to keep it as simple as you can, right? And the fourth bit, and again, I've mentioned this earlier, explain technical terms use. Even if it's something that you know 90% of your audience knows, there's no reason to go ahead and elaborate on it again. Just go ahead, make the effort and define it somewhere. Okay, because the last thing you want to do during a presentation is have to answer questions like, what does that term mean? Or what does this term mean? I mean, it takes away from the broader message of your presentation. So explain technical terms so that your audience can focus on what you did, what you found, and why that is important, right? Use quotations and examples sparingly, right? So when you use quotes or you use examples, you will lose a lot of time in being able to explain context to people, right? So unless you have a very, 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 very flexible so-called sort of timeline to work with, unless you're being given like a free hand in terms of presenting to an audience, make sure that you use quotations and examples sparingly, right? So this is what it is when it comes to knowing your audience. These elements, if you bear in mind, you should be good to go to start with, right? But now the second principle that you have to remember, and this I cannot stress on enough, is that you must strictly follow your time limits. All right. And it's there's a good reason for that, right? It is unlikely that you are going to be the only speaker that's scheduled for that day, right? So imagine, right? Imagine if you're somebody who is perhaps like, if you look at this blue quadrant, imagine if you are someone who is the last speaker of that session, or the speaker before lunch, or the speaker just before a tea or a coffee break. Have any of you had the experience of speaking at any of these slots? I mean, I have, and I have presented at such slots at conferences, and believe me, it's quite disheartening. A lot of folks don't want to pay attention to you at these slots. They're looking for you to finish. The telltale sign that is very obvious to a lot of people is the fact that they will start to check their watch, and when you are presenting, that's something that can really, really be disheartening to you as a speaker, right? So you know, remember the times when it was difficult for you to present at a slot because somebody else overshot their time. And remember to stick to your time limits, right? Because that's the best thing you can do for yourself as well as your fellow speakers, right? And very important, and I want everybody to remember this, that no slot is a bad or a difficult slot, right? It all comes down to you and your content, right? So the other thing that I would ask all of you to do when you make a presentation at a conference, be it virtual or be it physical, remember this, right? It doesn't matter how people are going to perceive what you say. What you should focus on first is being completely and utterly proud of what you have to present. You've put in hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of work together come to this point to make this presentation. If anything, you should feel an overwhelming sense of pride in being able to tell people about what you have found, what you have discovered, right? So you should always let that sense of pride and confidence be there within you before you make a presentation, right? And as long as you feel that way, as long as you remain confident, right, you will not ever feel like a slot is a bad slot. I have been able to present to people at 6:30 a.m. in the morning, and I have also been able to present to people at 11:30 in the night. It is perfectly fine. I mean, it's all about you. It's all about your energy. If you come into it with a lot of energy, with a lot of enthusiasm, then people will reciprocate. Your audience will reciprocate, right? And what you can do additionally is this: prepare your slides based on the time allocated to you, right? Before your conference begins, every conference makes it a point to tell you very, 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 very clearly as to how much time you'll be allotted on stage. It could be 10 minutes, it could be 15 minutes, it could be 20 minutes, it could be 40 minutes, 45 minutes, right? A lot of the times, the so-called the amount of time people are given on average is between 20 and 45 minutes. So remember, if you're getting 20 minutes on stage, you cannot present 60 slides. You cannot present even 50 slides for that matter. If you're really fast and if you talk really quickly, right, in which case your audience may not understand everything you're saying, right, you shouldn't be presenting more. If you're presenting, say for 20 minutes, try not to have more than 25 to 30 slides. Now, some people advocate for something even more extreme. Some people advocate the 10, 20, 30 rule. which is have 10 slides, talk for 20 minutes, and use 30-point font so that everybody can see what you're talking about. And when I say some people, the person who advocates this is Guy Kawasaki, who is one of the venture capitalists behind Canva. So I'm sure all of you may have heard about or used Canva at some particular point in time. Canva is a really, really popular kind of web design tool that's easy to access for people, and it's nice to make posters and pamphlets out of. It's really popular on social media. So he says that he wants or he prefers or people talk within 10 slides, talk only for 20 minutes, and use 30-point font. So if you have a slot that's worth 20 minutes, then this is the kind of maybe you want to consider doing this, right? But again, I would say take this piece of advice with a pinch of salt, because unless you're very, very experienced on the conference circuit, trying this might be a bit risky. So if that doesn't work for you, consider not spending more than, say, 90 seconds per slide and work backwards. Because if you have to spend more than 90 seconds per slide when you're rehearsing, then you need to go back and think about what it is that you are saying on that slide. Believe me when I say that. If you are having to spend more than a minute explaining what you're talking about and it's coming along difficult, it's not easy, it's not flowing off your tongue, then you need to go back and think about what you're saying and how critical it is for you to say it, right? So go with that thumb rule. Prepare the slides based on the time allocated to you, and stick to not more than 90 seconds per slide. Another principle for you to bear in mind is that when you go on the internet, right, most of the videos that you see that are shared on social media that explain things to you, the really, really good ones, they actually don't last for more than 90 seconds, even when they're explaining a slightly complicated concept. So again, 90 seconds is a more than a decent amount of time to explain a particular concept on a particular slide, right? This one's pretty obvious to a lot of people, but a lot of people hesitate to do it. Okay. Rehearse in front of a friend or a family member or somebody, because it's important to know how somebody is going to receive what you're about to say, right? You have to remember that going through your talk will take lesser time than presenting in front of an audience. It's going to be less taxing, it's going to be less scary to do it in front of a friend. So go ahead and present in front of a friend first. Catch hold of a friend, say that, hey, can you just spend some time listening to what I have to say about a conference? Sit them down, make that presentation, because if you fumble, if you make a mistake, you can go back and you can correct yourself, right? Also, we live in an era where it is so simple, right, for us to just record ourselves, right? So you have the tool at your disposal. Use your cell phone, set it up on a stand, all right, and talk in front of it. Set it up, talk in front of it, because it will do two things. One, you will figure out how your expressions are, whether you look confident, whether you look dreary, whether you look upset or sad, and how much time you're taking. A recording will also tell you about how much time you're taking and what you need to cut down. So talk to a friend or record yourself, right? And there's always somebody who can listen to you, right? And it doesn't take much. So don't be hesitant to at least present whatever you have found or whatever you want to talk about to a friend. And more importantly, try to record yourself as well if you can. Practice your talk with your slide deck in hand. When I say in hand, I mean keep it open. Don't just try to go off the top of your head and do the slide deck. Prepare the slide deck as you would present it at the conference, right? And talk about it, right? And rehearse till you feel confident. Now, the threshold for feeling confident is different for all of us, right? Some of us will feel great right with the first take. Some of us will feel great after 7 takes. Some of us won't even feel great after 20 takes, right? But like I said, you rehearse till at least subconsciously, you know the flow of your presentation, right? It is not humanly possible for you to remember every single point on every single so-called slide that you have prepared for a presentation. But it is humanly possible for you to remember how it flows from one point to another, right? So rehearse till you can at least remember the flow of your presentation, right? And I will reiterate this again, record yourself at least once, because that will be a big help to you before you go on and present. Moving on. This, again, a lot of people don't do it. A lot of people think it's not critical, right? In a pre-pandemic era, what this would mean is making your way to the conference room, if possible, a day in advance before the conference, or making it to the conference room maybe a half an hour or 20 minutes before the conference to check whether you could get used to the platform that you were speaking on. In this day and age, it means being able to set up a dry run before the actual session. And true story that I will tell all of you, right? Today is the first time that I'm presenting on this current platform, which is GoToWebinar. I've presented on Zoom, I present on Microsoft Teams most of the time, and sometimes I present on another platform called Demio. Right? These are all different platforms. Each platform has its own quirks. There are different ways to present your screen. There are different ways to use your webcam. In some cases, the platform affects the manner in which sound is captured through your device, right? So if you're using a headset and there's a microphone in it, in some cases, for example, in Zoom, the sound is completely different compared to, say, Skype or Microsoft Teams, which a lot of us use. So it's very, 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 very critical, especially now in the whole virtual conference world, that you set up a dry run before the actual session, right? And because I was using GoToWebinar today for the very first time, I actually met Samrat and team last month on a dry run to understand how GoToWebinar functions. What are its functionalities? Can I share a screen, or how do I share a screen? What are the other things? Where will somebody ask me a question? These are all the things that I try to so-called delineate before I make the presentation. And even today, before I spoke to all of you, I was here 20 minutes before Samrat's presentation just to check everything, just to make sure my slides appear the way they should, just to make sure that when I was presenting screen, I was able to see things clearly, right? And just to prepare myself for the space or the so-called subconscious zone I was going to be in while presenting to you, right? Another important thing, because we're in the virtual era, keep both a PowerPoint as well as a PDF version of your document handy. Why PDF? Why PDF? Because sometimes, because of internet or bandwidth issues in some geographies, it may not be possible for you to share a heavy PowerPoint slide. Like, for example, if you're putting high resolution images of anything you found or any photographs of the research you've done or any image from the research you've done, it could be a very high resolution image which could increase the file size. And if the file size is high and the hosting platform has bandwidth issues or server issues, then your presentation may not load properly, right? Which is why you should have a PDF version. When you convert a PowerPoint to a PDF, it kind of compresses all of that information to its very sort of essential elements, and you can see the text and you can see the images as well, right? And it's easier to load. So always keep a PowerPoint version as well as a PDF version handy in case you need to kind of present or in case there's a bandwidth issue at any point in time, right? Thirdly, and I mentioned this as well at the very start, test the platform that you're presenting on, understand its limitations, right? In some platforms, for example, implementing a background is difficult. It's not easy to implement a background or a virtual background. So when you're presenting on Zoom, for example, you can just cast a virtual background so that nobody can see what's happening behind you. Now, if you're presenting on another platform where they don't allow you to use a virtual background, then you have to make sure that on the day of the presentation, you need to go back and change your background to make sure that it looks presentable, right? So, like I said, small things with platforms, you will not figure it out unless you use it before the presentation, right? So it's very, very critical that you make it ahead of time, right? Or at least speak to your organizers and try to do a dry run way, way in advance, right? And finally, very critical, make sure you have more than one internet connection at your disposal. And when I say have more than one internet connection at your disposal, I am not saying get two Wi-Fi connections. No. If you do have a Wi-Fi connection, that's great. Make sure it's strong. Generally, you can work with around 4 Mbps worth of speed. I know a lot of broadband and fiber connections these days are much, much faster, right? But again, very critical, you know, if you have a Wi-Fi connection, please make sure that you have your cell phone handy. So I'll just switch on my camera to show you. As I'm talking to you right now, right, I have my cell phone with me right now, and on my cell phone, I have my hotspot on as well. Because if at any given point I lose power with my Wi-Fi, or if my Wi-Fi goes off, right, I have a backup. So that again remains very critical. Make sure you have a backup connection at your disposal. Moving on to the next point, point number 5, right? And this point I've put together especially for today's session. It's really important. Maintain Zoom etiquette. All right. And what I mean by, and this is a new term now. This is a new term because we are in the new normal, right? We are in the new normal. Thankfully, for some of us, it's at the end of the we can see the end of it with vaccination drives in different parts of the world, making it possible for us to kind of find a way out of the pandemic. But if you ask me, for the next year or so, for the next fiscal year at least, I still see a lot of what we do being virtual, right? And a lot of that has been characterized by people being on and being able to use Zoom, right? You won't believe this. I mean, last quarter, which is just in the last 3 months, like Zoom has seen 300 million visitors, right? And which was compared to last year, which was around 10 million before the pandemic, right? So it's very, very important that you're serious about how you utilize any platform online or how you present yourself on Zoom when making a presentation, right? And this is what you need to do. Here's what you need to do. Firstly, don't be late. If you're late or you have some sort of snag, you're going to lose your audience straight away. I guarantee it. All right. And again, I keep saying this. I said hi to everybody at the start. Turn on your camera and have a human connection because it's important for them to know that they're speaking to a person. Otherwise, they might just, zone out. And that's why you saw Samrat making a presentation. Like I switched on and I went off because, like I said, it was important for me to get you to focus on my presentation. But at the very start, be in a position to switch on your camera and say hi to everybody so that you can engage with them, right? Another important thing to bear in mind is to sit still. If you need to change your location or your setting, and this is very, very basic, if you need to change your location or you need to change your setting, switch off your video, excuse yourself saying, can you please excuse me for a minute, switch off your video, switch off your audio, change your location in case you need to, and then switch it back on again. Don't try to switch while you're making the presentation, mid-presentation. It disrupts the entire audience. They're wondering what's going on, and they can lose their attention span towards you, right? Close the proverbial office door. And when I say close the proverbial office door, I mean more than just a physical door. We today live in an era where anything in the world can distract us, right? There are so many things to distract us. And right now, as I'm speaking to you, I can name, I think, a good 4 to 5 things that can distract me, right? The one is the physical presence of somebody in the room. My cell phone can go off, my email can go off, my what do you call it? My Teams Messenger can go off, and somebody can reach out to me on an alternate platform like Zoom sometimes, where people may want to set up a video call, they might want to ping me or call me. So before this meeting, right? Before this meeting, before this presentation, I shut off my email. I went on do not disturb on any instant messaging platforms that I'm on. I've silenced my phone. I know where it is, but nobody can reach me because I won't be able to hear them, right? And also, the other thing is take care of the background, right? As you can see me, a good sort of rule of thumb to remember is that people should be able to see your shoulder, the axis of your shoulder and the top of your head, and a bit of space above your head. If your camera is beneath you or they're looking upwards to you, it can be really awkward. What we generally recommend to a lot of people when we interview them or when we record them on Zoom is to have this so-called axis, right? And try not to have anything distracting in the background. Don't have anything that moves around in the background. I know a lot of people have the habit of, at least on calls I've seen with a lot of clients and with a lot of authors, their dog might sort of run in and sit on their lap, or their cat might climb on and sit on their shoulder. Try to avoid that when you're making a conference presentation, right? And the other important thing for you to bear in mind is, just like you would for a conference. If you were presenting at a conference, you would have woken up in the morning, you would have made sure that your hair was cut and clean, that you had shaved, and you're taking care of your personal grooming. You would wear your best shirt, you'd iron it, you'd wear your suit and your tie, right? So dress up like you were physically there to present in front of a massive audience, right? Because that puts you in the right frame of mind, it puts you in the right headspace to make the presentation to make maximum impact, right? So dress up like you would if you were going to present to an actual audience as well, right? And of course, so that talks about, closing the office door. not having anything in the background, right? And the final point that I wanted to elaborate for everybody here essentially is that, do not try to multitask during your presentation. Very, very critical. As I'm talking to you right now, this is the only thing that I am doing right now. This is the only thing that I'm doing right now. I am not looking at email. I am not trying to figure something else out as I'm talking to you because I need your attention. I need you to understand everything that I'm saying to you, right? So if I'm trying to do something else alongside, it's going to be very difficult for me to get my point across. So it's very critical that you don't try to multitask. I know a lot of people who try to open something else or check something else while they're making a presentation. Don't do it. Just have your presentation in front of you, along with a few notes to help you remember a few key points that for you to say, if that's what you need, right? But don't do anything else. Try not to do anything else, right? Of course, if you do foresee any sort of interruption while you're presenting, then be courteous enough to your audience to just tell them that, you may be interrupted by something during this time for so and so reason, and to please excuse you if that happens, right? So that is also something that you can do and you should consider doing at the start. Don't interrupt or don't sort of get caught up with something while you are presenting to a large audience. Now, this is something that's, I would say, easier said than done, but start confidently. Start confidently because the first impression that you make with your audience matters a great deal. I've said 15, but 10 to 20 is, they will know whether they want to talk to you or not, right? So what you can do to begin with, and I did this right before I made this presentation to all of you, right? Is that as you begin your presentation, smile, take a deep breath and be calm. Compose your thoughts, think about where you are and think about why you're doing it. You're making a presentation at a conference, be it physical or virtual, because you've had this opportunity, you've made significant progress in your work, and it's time to tell the world about it. That should be your core motivation. And if that is your core motivation, that's all you have to reiterate to yourself. A lot of people I know believe in doing breathing exercises. Some people meditate. Other people sort of try to zone out an hour before they talk to an audience. But my advice is keep it simple, take a deep breath, be calm. If you feel nervous, just remember this. If you feel nervous, remember this very clearly. If you're feeling nervous, it's because you care about the presentation you're about to make. I was a bit nervous. I do have a few butterflies in my stomach every time I present to an audience because I care about how my audience is going to perceive what I'm saying to them. Right? It's not because I haven't prepared. So if you've prepared and you feel nervous, that's a good sign. It's not a bad sign. So next time you feel nervous before making a presentation, just tell yourself that's a good sign, right? The kind of presentations for me where it's sort of not worked out my way have been the ones where I haven't felt nervous or stressed out about making the presentation, right? So for me, at least personally, if I feel nervous, if I feel a little stressed out before I make a presentation, it's because I care, it's because I've prepared and I don't want to let anybody down. So that's a positive in my opinion. And that's how you should consider seeing it as well, right? Always be aware of your posture. If you were in the physical world, I would say stand straight and hold your head up, right? This will make sure that you make eye contact with members in your audience and it makes you audible. Do not droop, do not drop your body language, because that will make a big difference to how your audience perceives you. Be confident in what you say, right? And if you were, say, for example, talking to an audience virtually, like I just did, and I'm going to switch on my video again. I hope you folks can see me. Look straight at the camera or somewhere just off center from the camera. Like right now, as I'm talking to you, I am looking straight at my camera. I'm looking at my webcam because I'm pretending that you're there in my webcam, right? And that makes a big difference in me being able to engage with you, right? So I wouldn't look down, my shoulders wouldn't droop, I wouldn't be sitting like this, right? Or looking down as I'm talking to you. No, I'm straight up, I'm upright, I'm looking straight at you, and that's what you have to bear in mind when it comes to your posture. And of course, talk to your audience, right? I am telling you what's on my slides, right? But I am not reading off my slide. I'm not reading every point that you're hearing from me right now, right? Don't read from your slides. This is something that's very, very critical that a lot of people miss, right? You are talking about research that you have done for so many years, right? So you understand the basics of it. So own that. Own that knowledge that you have, because it's your knowledge, right? And talk to your audience, because they can read already. As I'm saying all of this to you, any one of you can stop listening to what I'm saying, zone out mentally, and read exactly what's on the slide. But is that making for any sort of engagement? No, it isn't. No, it isn't. So, make it a point to have more to say than what's visible to your audience, right? Don't just put everything you want to say on the slide. Unless you're going to give the slide to a bunch of people who are going to read it later and then dissect it, don't have a lot of text. Have just the right amount of text to give yourself the cue that is necessary, right, to communicate your point. Do not do more than that. Otherwise, again, you'll probably bore your audience with all the information you're giving. And this is a little bit of a trick in speech, use transitions effectively when you speak to people, right? What are transitions? Transitions essentially are filler words that you use as you move from one idea to another, right? This sort of verbally ensures that your presentation flows smoothly. Common examples of words to use to facilitate a transition, for example, are furthermore, or in addition, or consequently, or meanwhile, or finally. It's what you use to go from one thing to another. It's similar to the language that you will use in a scientific manuscript. So, for example, if you're talking about the fact that today my group found that XYZ thing happens when you treat something with with ABC, you know in addition, what I also found was this. So it's important that you transition, right? Don't break things up, or don't try to uh, break up ideas. Try to use so-called transitions in between the words you're using. And some helpful transitions to constantly keep using, and I use them all the time, is when you're talking about something similar time and time again, you can say a similar idea is, or another example is. That's another good transition to use when you're moving between ideas. When you're giving a point by point explanation, you should also first mention that, this is the first reason, this is the second reason. The other thing you can say is, firstly, I found this. Secondly, this was what happened. Thirdly, blah, blah, blah. And finally, X, Y, Z, right? The other sort of bit of a best practice that I'm going to give you that's not on the slide, right, is that when you are listing things verbally, try to not go above four things. Try to not go above four things, because the moment you go beyond the fourth thing, people have forgotten about the first thing you mentioned. So when you are explaining a list of things to people, try to go with first, second, third, and final. Right? That's what I do. I don't tend to go beyond 4 points, because if you go beyond 4 points, your audience may not necessarily be able to latch on to what you are presenting. Right? Also, when you're introducing a new idea, right, just remember that, introduce a pause there. When you're talking about something else, don't just go from, you're explaining the background, don't just jump straight into the results. Pause, let your audience absorb what you've just said, and then move into the next phase and introduce them to that phase. Say that, okay, now that I've talked to you about the background of what I've done, now that I've talked to you about what sort of went behind the scenes into this study, let's move into what we actually found. Build that little bit of momentum for yourself, build that little bit of excitement for your audience, right? And that is something that will make a big difference, right? Another phrase, a term that you can use is, to move on to another idea, to move on to another concept, right? Is another good phrase to throw in there to give your audience a subconscious cue that, hey, I'm moving on to another idea. Come with me, find out more. That remains really, really important. And this bit, which is the penultimate bit and the one that gives a lot of people, sleepless nights, questions and discussions about what you've talked about or what you've discussed. A lot of people seem to feel like, I've been through so much and I have made all these discoveries and I found all these things in my study. It was really hard to do. Why does somebody have to ask me a question about it? Why does somebody have to put me in a spot? Believe me, if somebody is asking you a question about what you did, okay, That is the best thing that can happen to your presentation. Believe me, like if you make a presentation and a bunch of hands go up or a bunch of people are, typing things out saying, hey, I want to check about this. Hey, can you just get back to me on XYZ things? That's the best possible thing that can happen to your presentation because it means that people have listened, people have absorbed, people have taken note of something and they want to know more. So if you see hands go up, no matter how difficult the questions may be that follow, just remember that your presentation to an extent has been a success because people were able to grasp what you were saying. And I think that at the end of the day is what you should strive for when you make a presentation. People should understand what you have to say, not the complexity of what you've said, but what you have actually said, right? And yes, you know, if you don't understand the question, and a lot of the times, a lot of people fumble, they answer whatever they know, right? If you don't understand the question, stop, ask the person to repeat it, right? Ask them to rephrase it, right? If they are rambling or they're not able to explain it, break the question down for them. Sometimes when somebody asks me a question in a presentation or even during a presentation or a sales pitch or during a conference, what I do essentially is if they've spoken for a considerable amount of time, I go back and I repeat what they've asked and check with them whether that's what they meant to say, right? So if they've asked me three different questions, I say, okay, your first question I think is this, your second question is this, and your third question is this, right? And then if I know the answers to all three of them, well and good, I answer them sequentially. If I don't know the answer, I say, I know the answer to the first one, and the answer to the first one is this. I also know the answer to the second question you're asking me. The answer is this. But the third one I haven't looked at. The third one I haven't even considered. But your question brings a very pertinent sort of point to my attention, and I will look into it. And maybe I will connect with you to perhaps answer that question for you in the future, right? Moreover, always, 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 always thank the people in the room, on the presentation, wherever they are. Thank them for raising a question because you will not understand what the gaps are in your work. You will not understand what you need to do better moving forward if they don't ask that question. So be grateful for that question, be positive about that question, right? And again, if you don't know something or you're not sure about something, believe me, that's a great opportunity to network with somebody. It's a great opportunity to reach out to them after the conference or after the talk and say, hey, you asked me this question. I don't know yet. It'll take me a couple of weeks to figure out. Could you give me like an email ID or could you give me some sort of contact information where I can reply to you with this? Right? Because I think that makes a humongous difference, right? They will remember that gesture with that you've made. And that can help. I mean, who knows? That could be how you discover the next collaborator you're going to work with, right? That could help open the door to a research problem that you've been grappling with. So a lot of questions being asked at your presentation is a great sign, right? And it means that it's going to give you the opportunity to network with a bunch of people moving forward. Cool. Moving forward, if for some reason no questions are asked, right? If people don't have too many questions to ask and things like that, uh, don't take it to heart. Don't take it to heart. Maybe it was something. Maybe the presentation was really clear, right? Maybe it was something that people understood but didn't really have much to say about, right? So go ahead, give your audience a few cues saying, would any of you have any questions about my methodology? Would any of you have any questions about, what I've explained here? Would any of you have any questions about my results? Do they seem okay to everybody? Ask these questions, right? And if, again, that doesn't elicit any sort of response, go back, point a weakness out in your paper, point a weakness out in your study. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. You can say that, look, I would have ideally liked to test this in vitro as well, not just in vivo. Like, for example, in molecular biology, that was some of the things that I would say a lot. Like, I've tested this in vivo, but I haven't tested this in vitro. Oh, sorry, I've tested this in vitro, not done it in vivo. I would like to test it in vivo to know whether this actually works or not. So I would go back and I'd point out a weakness in the paper again, because it's a talking point. It's something that allows people to know that what you've created is essentially what you've come up with or what you've discovered is essentially human. right? And that's important. That's important because it allows you to build connections with people, right? If you've gone ahead and given your audience cues on how to ask or what questions to ask, and they've not asked you any questions, don't worry at all. You know, you've done your bit, you made a good presentation, be confident. And last point, ensure a natural closing, right? When you feel like, you know, you've answered enough questions and things have worked out, you know, and you're out of time, just ask the audience once whether they have any more questions. Offer your contact information, give them your university email ID, you know, convey to the audience that you're open to receiving questions over them for email. And if there are no more questions, you thank your audience for attending the session, or walk off the stage, off the podium, or, you know, switch off your sharing on whatever platform you're on, and thank the organizers for giving you the opportunity, right? Bonus round. What are some of the things that you must avoid? Okay. Do not use font that won't be legible to people at the back of the room, or even when they're viewing it from home. You never know. A lot of the times people may be viewing a presentation from a cell phone or a tablet, or a mobile device. So use a good, healthy sized font where people can see things clearly, right? Do not incorporate or use any sort of visual aid that you're not comfortable with or you haven't rehearsed with, right? A lot of people I know try on the very last day, they have a bright idea that they're going to take something into the presentation and show it to people. Don't do it if you're not comfortable or you haven't rehearsed with it. You're setting yourself up for trouble if something doesn't work out. So try to avoid that, right? Don't be unstructured. You know, follow the points and the flow of the presentation in a particular way and insensibly. If you break the flow of your presentation, your audience is not going to be able to follow, you know, what you're talking about. Again, like I mentioned, don't go over the time that's allotted to you. Don't continuously look at the notes on your slide deck. Don't skip your dry run. Do not end abruptly. And don't panic if you don't know the answer to a question from a member of your audience. So that brings us to the next part of our presentation, which is, you know, with regard to networking, right? Do some homework before the conference. I made a mention of this at the very start of the presentation. Make a list of people who you'd like to meet. Prepare an elevator speech. What is an elevator speech? An elevator speech is nothing more than a couple of lines to introduce yourself and what you do, right? So spend some time talking about that or figuring out what that is. When I was doing my research, I would tell people, hi, my name is Shane Ritquist. I'm a junior research fellow, and I'm currently working on the proteomics of rice, right? So I'd have that. I'd have that as my introductory line, and I could get started in having a conversation with them. And when you've made a presentation, make sure you have some sort of call to action that people can access. When I say it's a call to action, I mean, one is an email ID or a phone number where, no, I wouldn't say phone number, but an email ID where people can reach you with their queries. Another nice thing to have, a nice to have, not a must have, but a nice to have, is maybe say a link to a personal website or a microsite that you can tell people to follow you on, or reach out to you on. A lot of researchers I know these days, they tend to go ahead and make a separate profile just for their research. So a good LinkedIn profile, if you have that, or if you've spent time preparing that, give that across to people and tell them to reach out to you. A lot of people I know, after I make a presentation, a bunch of people reach out to me on LinkedIn, right? So that's a good way to just interact and network with people, right? Don't just speak to people who you know, talk to people from other geographies, right? Try to reach out to speakers of the sessions, right, who you deem were interesting, because they will of course sort of give you more ideas and it'll be a good experience. Reach out to authors and participants of blogs and forums that you usually follow. And if there are any journal editors attending your event, make sure you try to connect with them as well. It's important to understand the perspective of the people that you submit your work to, that is the journal. So try to connect with them. Having a rapport makes a big difference along the line in terms of submitting your work, right? And of course, give people a way of getting back to you, right? So have a presence in social media. That goes without saying. All of us today have some sort of presence in social media, but invest the time and the effort in creating your own personal profile that talks about what you do, and keep that up to date so that when people reach out to you, they know what you're about, they know what you've studied, and they can talk to you about what you're doing. So have some sort of presence in social media so people can reach out to you. If you do have a personal website, or if your lab has a website, make sure people know about it so that they can maybe raise an inquiry with you. And yes, of course, please do share your university email account with people so that they know how to reach out to you. Try not to share your personal email account uh, at conferences. Of course, I'd like to end here essentially by talking about these take-home messages. Plan your talk based on the audience. Stick to the time that's been given to you. Be clear, be confident, maintain eye contact, engage with your audience, right? And network, very important. So I think with that, we come to an end of this presentation. I will leave the floor open now to any questions that any of you might have.
Thank you so much, Shane. Um, Excellent, I would say. Personally, I found it very interesting, and for myself, I learned really many things. And see, I have to be more upright in my talk, not lean too much forward when I'm talking to the audience. Yeah, Shane, thanks so much. We have questions which are coming in, and I will start uh, with a few now for you. Okay.
Sure.
So there is one question I think which is relevant to all of us. Is the participant is asking, I'm interested to know more about how I can interact and network better in scientific community online. Are there any particular networks that you would recommend that one should join? Like, how to, because these days we are very much limited with physical networking. So how about online networking?
Right. So I think that's a great question that's come in. So way before the pandemic hit, one of the things we realized is that the key forum to connect with scientists, like a majority of the scientific community, hangs around and makes their feelings known on Twitter. A lot of people sort of try to bond with other people on Twitter. So if you want to really be able to interact and reach out to people directly, Twitter is a great source to get started in. Of course, the second most popular and one where a lot of people make their presence felt is LinkedIn, right? And all of us know the benefits of being on LinkedIn. It's a professional social networking platform that allows us to connect with experts and businesses alike, right? LinkedIn's another place where people directly network post conferences. So I said this right at the end of my presentation. Every time I finish a conference or a presentation with somebody, the first place I generally see a lot of activity is LinkedIn. People trying to reach out to me, people asking me questions, and then I get in touch with them. They let me know about any sort of what they have in mind for their careers and what I think about what path they have to go. So LinkedIn is where you should be reaching out to people, right? ResearchGate is another space that's very, very popular with researchers. But like I said, with ResearchGate, it's more of a closed community. You're talking again to a lot of researchers themselves. So like I said, LinkedIn, Twitter, uh, ResearchGate are all fantastic platforms to directly just reach out to somebody, to send a connection request and to get started on a conversation. And of course, if you are so-called familiar with any particular Facebook groups that are legitimate, and you can also join certain particular Facebook groups to kind of talk to people there. But like I said, generally from a validation standpoint, we've seen it happens best on Twitter, LinkedIn, and to an extent on ResearchGate. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I agree with you. I think LinkedIn is really that platform which, like most of the post-webinar, post-conference interaction happens on LinkedIn, and that I think that's a very good advice. And ResearchGate, of course, also like if you are into heavier academic work, want to be more noticed. Another question regarding online etiquette, Zoom, as you coined it, the Zoom etiquette, was what about on the other side, the audience? What etiquette should the audience have? Like, let's say now we're listening to a speaker, we're in a meeting. Is it etiquette to keep the video on, or can we close our video while we're listening to it? Like, any suggestions on that?
So with regard to online etiquette for the audience, what working virtually has managed to do is that it gives a lot of control to the organizers, for example. So an organizer can choose to just switch off sound and switch off video for the attendees, or the organizers can choose to switch on video for the attendees. Now, you don't, as an audience member in the audience, you don't necessarily have to switch your video on, right? One thing I would say to you is that if you're on a platform and the organizer has given you the ability to keep your sound on or keep your microphone on or your video on, I would suggest you at least mute it, because this is a very important thing. While it is possible to physically ignore an interruption during a webinar, it is doubly hard to ignore anybody sort of pinging you or making a sound while you're presenting, because your voice is the only one you're here. You're in a room, right? Nobody else is around you. So when you hear something else come in, it completely phases you, throws off your flow of thought. So I would say if you want to be a good audience member, switch off your audio, switch off your video, unless the speaker asks for it, right? So switch off your audio, switch off your video. uh, the speaker will generally tell you if they're comfortable with questions while they talk, right? A lot of speakers, like myself, I encourage conversation while I'm talking. I like people to ping, pose questions. I like that because the unfamiliarity kind of makes the talk interesting, right? Because if you just go with a particular script and you present one point after another, it's pretty dry. So I prefer it when people ask questions, when people interrupt me, when people try to break my chain of thought, because it makes my conversation more interesting. But a lot of people don't prefer that. So listen in to your speaker. Generally, speakers who don't prefer being interrupted will tell you that we will take questions at the end of the session. So keep your questions for the end. Don't just pop them on a screen because they may seem to find it distracting.
Great, thank you for that. I'm continuing because questions are coming in, and I think we would like to get as much as questions posed to you, Shane, since you are here with us. And let me say that a lot of kudos are coming in for your presentation. The audience really loved it, so that also wanted to mention.
Thank you.
If you aren't a good speaker of English, and could that person make his presentations on par with other speakers who are native? Like, let's say you're not a native speaker, like any tips, how you could improve your presentation skill if English is not your native or you're not as fluent as the other conference participants?
So I say this time and time again, it isn't about your language, but it's about your content, right? You may not be familiar with English, you may be familiar with any other language that may be your primary language of choice, right? The key is, if you understand what you're talking about, right, the language doesn't necessarily become a barrier if you're passionate about what you're talking about. You tend to worry about what you're saying and how you sound if you're not sure about what you're talking about, in my opinion, right? So having good English skills, having good language skills is a bonus, right? But if you're not fluent in English, or English isn't your strength, there are obviously enough opportunities, or that there will be an opportunity for you to ask an organizer or ask your audience as to whether they're okay with you going bilingual. This is something I've seen in conferences where I have been to, where somebody asks, and I've seen this with Hindi, where people go, can we speak a mix of Hindi and English while I explain this to you, right, in India? And people were okay with it. They were like, we are okay with it to an extent. And then they kind of mixed what they said, and it worked for them. So it's important to just gauge whether your organizer would accept that. But I wouldn't say that not having strong English language skills will limit you. It has Presenting well has nothing to do with your skills in a particular language. It has to do with how confident you feel about what you're talking about. So if you mix it up
True.
here and there, trust me, the audience will understand. They will understand that where you're coming from is genuine, and they will appreciate it. Nobody's going to look down upon you for switching languages in between as well. Yeah.
True. Like, I think, like, many of us have been at international conferences, and we've seen that there are people who are not a native language, but they do an excellent presentation because they know their research very well and they're very convincing and also can convey the message. So I think that's not something to worry, right? Another question, Shane, is coming in. It's like if someone is asked abruptly ad hoc to present something, let's say, you are in a video conference and suddenly the organizer asks, Shane, can you come in, play something and also explain about the subject, how to present effectively there, like if you don't have a presentation ready, but maybe you have a manuscript or something.
So if you have a manuscript or a presentation ready, if you have a manuscript in hand and somebody asks you to present something ad hoc, all right, my go-to was a chalk and a board. Like I wouldn't think about anything else. I would go back and I would just say, do you have a whiteboard and a marker? And I would just, when I'm making an ad hoc presentation, what helps me a lot is just having a whiteboard and a marker if I'm doing an ad hoc, if I have to explain a concept to somebody. But before I do that, I'm assuming I'm getting some sort of time to just put my thoughts together. So when I have to put my thoughts together, I generally take a piece of paper and I write down the larger topics or larger points that I'm going to talk about. And assuming that I'm familiar with what I'm going to talk about, the larger points that I have, I just keep that handy with me. And then I use a marker and a whiteboard to explain it. So that is something that helps a lot. If you're not sure and you want to go off a manuscript, just figure out what are the 4 things or what are the 3 things or what are the 5 things that are most critical and that you would want somebody to know, right? Just remember that what if I had to explain this to somebody, what would they want to know? Or if I had to hear this from somebody, what would I want to know? That's the question you ask yourself, and you'll get five points of not more than 5 points. You should get not more than 5 points, and then just take a chalk and a board or a marker and a whiteboard. That's it. That's all you need to kind of get started and be able to explain to people, right? Or if you don't have that at your disposal, again, I'm just troubleshooting a little bit further. You do have an image in your manuscript, right? You will have a manuscript image. You will have one key central image that you think is the best representation of your study, right? In my case, it used to be a particular microarray that I ran. So I used to have this massive diagram of a microarray. So I would just put the microarray on, and then I would tell the story that I had to tell them. So I can keep them engaged visually. You have one visual element to engage with them, and then you can explain everything you have to around that image. So you can, if you don't have a whiteboard or whiteboard and a marker or a chalk and a blackboard, focus on the central image of your manuscript or your research and take it from there. Just explain that.
Great, thank you. You were mentioning that use your institutional email rather than your private email for networking at conferences. And one of the audience is asking why, why is it better to use the institutional rather than your personal?
Because firstly, for example, if Samrat was going to talk to me and me and Samrat were going to interact for the first time, Samrat would probably give me his Euraxis ID and I would probably give him my Cactus ID. There's a reason for that. And that I don't know, we brand that as professionalism, right? But if you look at the underlying reason for that, the underlying reason essentially is that it adds a bit of legitimacy to who you are, right? It's not just you as an individual, it's you associated or affiliated with an institute, right? It adds a level of legitimacy and it helps compartmentalize it. You don't want work related or research related things to start permeating into your personal life, right? You want that to be a separate thing, which is why I suggest always share a university ID, share a work ID. At a conference, you always share your work ID. You never share your personal ID, right? Because you're talking about work. You are networking for the purpose of work. You're not networking to get to know the person better or be friends. You may become friends down the line and then you can share a personal ID, but at least to start with, use an institutional ID.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. It just makes a complete different impression, if you have a visiting card with your institutional affiliation, and a private email can be shared afterwards, like if you are have more contact with that person or want to interact on a more personal level. More questions are coming in, Shane. What about dress code at online webinars and meetings? Like, have you any, like, we are doing a lot of webinars, and maybe I can say from my point of view that international meetings and especially Europeans are more relaxed about the dressing code. Like, you will see European presenters with, maybe with a t-shirt or just very casual. I think more in a South Asian context, you see people more, dressed up, and it gives us, of course, you showing that you're taking that webinar very serious, as a presenter, of course, for instance, from my point of view. But still, I think, we are all sitting at home, so we are not, we cannot, everyone knows that we are at home, so it makes it more relaxing also, What would you say, Shane? The
So
dressing
what I
code.
would say is, what I would say with the question, I would probably flip that question around for the person who asked it, and ask them, what would you wear if you met them in person? What would you wear if you met them in person? If the answer to that question is I'd wear a t-shirt if I was meeting them and presenting it, then wear a t-shirt. If you don't know them and you feel like I'd wear a shirt, or I'd wear a tie because they're really senior and I want to be respectful and professional, then wear a shirt and tie. If you feel like you need to wear a suit, wear a suit. I mean, like I said, I mean, your audience, at least all the people we interact with, right? At the very basic level, I wear what I would wear to work every day, right? When I'm even working from home, I'm wearing clothes that I would wear and go to work, right? So I'm wearing what I would wear to work and make a presentation. So that's
Yeah.
exactly the dress code that you need to follow. Because, and even then, the other thing I mentioned is you prepare like you were going into work. You would, if I had a big presentation on a Monday, like I would wake up on time. And there are small things that you do. I would wake up on time. I would be focused. I'd be thinking about that the entire day. I would make sure that an hour before the presentation or whatever, I didn't eat too much so that I didn't feel sleepy. I wouldn't eat anything that made me uncomfortable later. I would not want to, I would not want to have anything near me that distracted me. Like you have to behave as if you were physically there. Like right now, as I'm talking to Samrat, I believe in my head, for me, this window is an illusion. For me, I am actually physically talking to Samrat. And if I was physically talking to Samrat, then this is how I would look, right? And
Mm.
that's what you have to bear in mind when you present. And I think the same applies to Samrat. He's wearing a nice blue shirt because he's presenting to all of you, and that's how he would present if he was there physically. So that's the question you have to
Yeah,
ask
my
yourself.
my
What would
my
you wear
wife chose
physically?
it for me. My wife chose it for me.
There you go. So yeah.
So I need advisors always, like it's good to have someone to tell you, like, okay, this is for this setting, choose this shirt. Okay, let's go on. Yeah, there are many questions. We have let's say like another 10 minutes. Shane, is that okay?
Yeah, I think
For
that's fine. Yeah.
Q&A.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, should one attend conferences only in one specialized field, or also would you recommend to go for conferences with like where broader themes are there and not necessarily only the research I'm working or one is working with
Okay.
for
So
networking
there is
purposes maybe also.
right. So I think there are, firstly, you don't have to take this decision on your own. Whoever's question this is, you don't have to necessarily take this question independently. You will see sufficient cues and clues in the institute you're in. So when I was doing my research at the University of Delhi, uh, I mean, I knew from my lab that there were going to be a certain set of conferences that we would 100% attend, right? Because those were important to us from a subject matter expertise. Now, from a department perspective, right, I knew that there were a broader set of conferences that we could attend just to get exposure, right? So those were the can attend, but not must attend. And then at the institute level, right, at the institute level, there were bigger conferences, ones where you'd see the prime minister of a country come by and dignitaries of another country come by. I've attended those as well for exposure, because you need to understand how far science goes and how far your science goes and how it influences policy making. Because see, it's all about perspective, right? Today you started as a researcher, you're working on a project, or you start working on a project based on the fact that you've inherited it from somebody in your lab, right? That's how you start. Somebody was working on something, you've taken it over as a part of a learning experience, and then you own it eventually. But you have to grow out of that sphere and think about how your research is going to impact society at large. And you're not going to get that perspective unless you attend conferences where you see how research impacts policymaking. So I was sort of working with molecular biology and agriculture, trying to understand that interface as to how that would help, our economy, right? And from there, you kind of try to attend bigger conferences to understand what sort of decision making is happening at the policy level, right, with regard to agronomy, with regard to how agriculture impacts the economy, right? What are the things that decision makers are thinking about or looking at? So you need to think about it like a concentric circle. So the the smallest circle is the must attend, the stuff that's very directly related to your field. The broader circle, the next big circle, talks about things that you can attend are allied, and the biggest one is of course the one where broad research ideas and broad concepts are impacting policy making. So you should attend all three types, in my opinion, at least once along the way, so that you gain perspective as to how your research makes an impact. Otherwise, you
True.
know it gets very difficult with the nitty-gritties of everyday work. So yeah.
Yeah, true, true. No, this is very good advice. Thank you, Shane. Shane, one of the participants is asking if you could share like a sample presentation of like you're from molecular biology. That's your background, right? You were mentioning.
Yes. Yes.
If you have any presentation of yours, because that participant is from the same field and
Okay.
was wondering if you could share a sample with her or with the
Okay.
audience. Like,
I
I'll leave it up to you.
So unfortunately, I don't possess those presentations because they were made 8 years ago. All right. And
Yeah.
they are officially the property of the institute that I was working in. Right. So I
Okay.
wouldn't have any samples right now, but I would so if you're looking for a good presentation, whoever's asked this question, I'm assuming you've attended a conference at your own institute or your own department. Every department at every sort of master's level, PhD level, every department has its yearly conference. Every department has at least one conference, right? So in that conference, every year there is a prize for who is the best speaker or who is the best presentation maker. Start there. Start there. Try to reach out to that person and talk, have a look at their presentation, or have a look at, just look around you, look at your lab, for example. Who is the best person at presenting concepts during your Saturday meeting, for example? For me, Saturday was when we all met in the lab and we all discussed what we were doing that week. So we had a few people, I had a couple of people whose work I was overawed by. I couldn't believe, oh my God, this is fantastic what they're doing. I would reach out to them and I'd say, could you share the deck that you made? Could I have a look at it? I just wanted to see the points you've made again. So that's a good place to go. That's a good place to go. I think that'd be more helpful for you rather than getting it from me, who's done it, so many years ago.
Thank you, Shane. This, I think, is a good advice, and I think the participant also can follow that advice. Another question, I think, which many of us have been in that situation. That person is saying that he or she had a interview with a professor or to present her research. Let's say you're presenting in front of an audience, and from the very beginning, that professor was standing and playing with the cell phone time and time again, and made the person, our attendee, very awkward. Like, how can we handle those situations when we have the feeling that my audience is actually not really listening to me? They're more on their phone or they're chatting. It gives us
Okay.
a very awkward
Okay.
feeling, right?
We don't
And I think we all have been there at some point.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I've been there where in a front row, and I'm talking about presentations, right? Something that's even more difficult to do is, say, for example, a performance art. For example, if you're in theater and the first row of the audience just doesn't care, they're looking at something or they're reading something. The first thing that you have to remember as a presenter is that that's not on you. The fact that somebody is not paying attention is not on you, right? So you need to take that burden off your shoulders. You need to drop that weight off your shoulders. Just drop it. That's not your fault that somebody is not paying attention. What you can do politely is ask the audience member or whoever you're presenting to, if it's awkward and they're distracting you, it's perfectly possible to, in a tactful way, say, sir, is there a problem? Should I come back later? Should I present at another time? That's a very polite question. I'm not asking something offensive. I'm not hurting anybody's feelings. I'm just saying, is this a bad time for me to present? I mean, if it's a bad time, then I'll come back later. Or if you don't have the time to listen to this presentation, I'm sorry, I'll come back later. Or if someone's in an audience and they're distracting you, I just generally just look at them and say, sir, is there any question that I can answer for you? Is there anything I can help you with? Are you having some sort of difficulty? And it's a genuine question. I'm not being sarcastic. I'm not being sarcastic. I'm not trying to make anyone feel awkward. I am genuinely being honest and I'm saying, are you having a problem? Can I help you with something? You look like you're in some discomfort. And that immediately just snaps the person out of it. It brings them out. Because they know you're looking at them doing what they're doing, it makes them conscious. Now, if they react badly to it, or if the professor isn't listening to you or is like, no, I have something to do, then you ask, should I come back later, sir, or should I present in some time? And let them, they say, no, present now. You continue with your presentation, make the presentation to the best of your abilities, and remember, it wasn't your fault. It wasn't because your presentation wasn't good, or what you had to show them was not of value. And also, if it was not of value to them, or it was not of value to your audience, it will be of value to some other audience. Right. Another thing that I think a lot of young researchers perhaps don't realize is, with time you realize, what you realize after a point is that there is a lot of time between when you find something of value and when other people see the value in it. Sometimes it takes years, and that's not just true for research, it's true for your career. Right? Something you might think is great might take years for people to see the potential in, and that's just part of the process. That's not because your work is of substandard quality. It just takes time in the world. It just takes time. So just let that go and move on. But if that happens and somebody is distracting you looking at their phone, just ask them, is this a bad time? Should I come back and present later? Should I, should would you like me to come back another time and talk to you about this? Because I'd be happy to. So yeah, so I think
Thanks. I
that
think
answers that. Yeah.
yeah, no, definitely does, and I think this is very good to like make that persons aware that you are noticing it. Because maybe they are not really, I don't think that they might want to disturb you or make you feel awkward. It just maybe they're just distracted. Like as we know, we easily get distracted these days with our mobile phones and everything. Shane, two more questions and then we will wrap it up. It has been a very good, long, informative webinar, and I think a very good Q&A session so far. Regarding PowerPoint animations, Shane, what would you recommend? Is there a rule to avoid being too flat, or at the same time maybe too noisy? Like, should we have too much animations or too less? Like what is a good mix?
Okay. So in my opinion, all right, for me, simple is best. That's my principle. You saw my entire presentation. I don't know how any of you might feel about it, but did you notice there was not a single transition in there? But did you miss anything? Did you miss anything? You didn't miss anything, right? Transitions were, those animation effects were cool back in the 90s, right? These days, people tend to care very little about it because PowerPoint has become such a ubiquitous platform for making presentations. So people just know that you're presenting something, you're using PowerPoint, that's all that it is. Not having any transition or animation effects is perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. If you want to say, in my case, for example, if I want to show an image where I want to first show the image and then show people what's special in the image, yeah, for that you can have an arrow drop in or you can have an arrow appear. But like I said, just make things appear and disappear or fade in and fade out. Like don't try all the zooming in and swooping and turning around. That's something that was great in maybe the 90s and the noughties and in the 2000s, but it's not something people really care about anymore. And I can tell you this because I'm involved with designing presentations. Every year I work with the European Science Foundation, and we work with some of their brightest and youngest researchers to tell their research stories. And we don't use any animations or transitions. If we're going to do that for the person, then we just go ahead and make a video, because the video will have your voice in it. You can do all the animation and all the funky stuff that you want to do. If you're presenting with somebody, trust me, working with too many transitions is confusing. Keep it simple, have a fade in, fade out, keep it simple, keep it a manageable amount all the time is what I'd say if you want to have it. And in my case, I don't even use it, because what if you have to give somebody a PDF, like I said? What if you don't have bandwidth and you need to send a PDF of the presentation? Then none of your transitions are going to work anyway. So transitions are good, but your presentation has to be good without them. Otherwise, you're going to
Yeah.
create a lot of so-called obstacles for yourself on the day to remember and bear in mind and things like that.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for that. Last question, Shane. Any suggestions how to prepare for a presentation if there's a mixed audience, like academics, people from your field, but also bureaucrats, practitioners, ordinary citizens, like just to maybe a few suggestions.
Right. So pretty straightforward actually there. What you do is, see, understand something. There are some parts of your work that most people, 95% of the people will understand, and there are some parts of it that only a certain 5% will get. When you're working with a mixed audience, the safest thing to do, in my opinion, is be as generic and explain as much as you can at the start when you're talking about your background, because that is where you're going to be able to hook your general audience. Right. So, for example, again, I keep going back to the pandemic because that's all that we seem to be impacted by day in, day out, right? So if I was talking about, say, how a particular vaccine worked, if I was making a presentation on a vaccine, right, and I was talking to a mixed audience, I would spend the first couple of slides talking about where we are with COVID-19, right? And then I would talk about how mRNA works, because the mRNA mechanism is one that we're using for one set of vaccines. There is an entire set of vaccines that's based on the principle of mRNA. So I'll then spend time explaining mRNA. And then at the third level is where I'll talk about the exact specific mechanism. That is where I'm giving the experts what they want to know. But before that, that's happening at the third step. Right, so the first two steps in your presentation should be explaining and bringing people into the concept, and then you go into the hardcore science. And then again, after you've explained the hardcore science, you taper off with things like data and what that means, the interpretation of that data, and then you end on broad implications. So it's a bit like an hourglass. You start really broad for a general audience, you bring it down, make it really narrow for your specific audience, and then you make it broad again so that your general audience has something to take away. So if you follow that hourglass structure when you're putting things together for a mixed audience, I think you should be fine.
This is a very good way to describe it, the hourglass model. Thank you, Shane, so much. Okay, we are at the end of this very special webinar with our great speaker, Shane Rydquist from Cactus Communication Editage. Shane, thanks again for a well-structured and great presentation and a very good Q&A session. I think we got a lot out of from you, and please, we will send the presentations of Shane and also the Euraxis presentation of mine to you together with the link of this recording. We will upload it on our YouTube channel, so you can also go back again and watch our presentation in case you missed something. And please stay with us for the upcoming webinars on publishing in scientific peer-reviewed journals and how to increase your impact as a researcher on social media, especially. This is going to be also very exciting in the coming weeks. We will release the webinar dates very soon. Wishing you all a wonderful Friday evening here in India. We also have audience from Europe and other countries. So wherever you are, have a nice weekend ahead of you. Stay safe, and thanks for joining us. Bye-bye. Bye, Shane. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.